live and we are here. So listen, we're going to go ahead and get started on such a wonderful talk. And I think majority of the people on this talk are artists. So we don't even have to do all this extra preliminary talking. But what I want to do is I want to say thank you so much to Asia Hamilton and Womxnhouse Detroit, just to say thank you so much for inviting me to actually talk with Ricky Weaver. I love Ricky. We recently just met. I knew of her work, but we met actually at my mother-in-law's DJ house party celebration for her Kresge thing, right? And me and Ricky just talked outside. It was very brief, but the energy was there. And we exchanged phone numbers. And I actually just texted her today. And I was like, look, our ancestors were in conversation before we even got here today. So everything was just in full circle. And we're now here. And Asia was listening to her ancestors to ask me do this talk with Ricky. So we are all just in agreement and together. So I'm so excited to just introduce you to Ricky Weaver. If you do not know her work, please go visit her website. I would love to always start with bios, but we already talked about it. Like doing bios is like, that's played out. Go look at our website, please, and see all the accolades that we have. I think what's more important is that we spend this time with Ricky and just really get up close and personal, hear her voice, let her words that fit easy in her mouth fit easy in our ears, right? And get some inspiration from that. So I would rather spend that time just kind of like building with her. So please go visit her website. She has a show that's coming up in 2023 that will be here in Detroit in conjunction with University of Michigan. So she's probably going to talk a little bit more about that, but exciting things to come. But what I want to do is, I think we are all very beautiful, but we want to look at some art and we are going to, and let me just share Ricky's, somebody just asked about your website. So let me just share it in the chat right now. And I had it already locked and loaded. Okay. I had it locked and loaded. There you go. Her website is there. Please visit it. Enjoy so much work. You'll see some features today that we're going to be discussing, but yeah, let's do our thing. So Ricky and I would love for you all to look at our wonderful faces. But like I said, we are going to be focused on the art today and walking through that. So without further ado, let me just do a shared screen and we're going to look at some art, y'all. Okay. All right. So here we are. So we are in conversation with Miss Ricky Weaver, whom I adore. Big hand clap. All right. All right. Here's some few of her latest works. Ricky, if you could just kind of talk to us about this, since I already talked to you about, or talked to everyone, I should say, about what's happening in 2023 with University of Michigan and David Klein Gallery.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. And I shade to everything you said. I'm not going to be super redundant, but the love is here. You already know. Asia, Womxnhouse, all that. Okay. So in 2023, I'm going to have a solo show at David Klein. I've been really busy and moving around, so I don't want to say a date, but I'm working on a solo show called Crucify My Flesh, which will see some of the works in progress for that show. And then I will be doing a residency fellowship award / something. It hasn't been announced yet, but I will share the announcement with you all. But that will be at the University of Michigan, and they will overlap. So I'm going to play with that proximity there. So that's what we got going on. More objects, more sculptural things from me in the next year.
Which I love. We talked about the whole idea of being an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary artist. Some people interchange those. What does that mean for you? I mean, I know that, a lot of people know your photography work, but how was that when you decided to first dive into tapping into other things? And were you afraid, or did someone say you shouldn't do that, or you should stay in one practice? You hear that a lot too, especially when you go to grad school, you should stay in the lane. What is that for you? What did that mean for you?
There was a moment that I realized that my practice has always been interdisciplinary, but I think it was a maturing of the way that I understood what practice is. And so after integrating the practice into my day-to-day and my daily life, I thought back to from the time I could hold a pencil. I've always been drawing. Figure drawing was my thing. I did that up until I was almost about to graduate from undergrad. And then I started with photography, but I always wanted to do things with my hands. I would like crochet with my aunt all the time. I have tons of musicians in my family. I think we talked about this I played classical piano, flute. And so like all of these things were a part of the practice and influencing the practice in ways that I didn't really understand until I think a real moment of clarity was after reading In Search of Our Mother's Gardens and thinking about like, you know, what it means to have something to sit with it and energy. I was just in conversation with a couple people a couple hours ago about this. So having to like, just having something that you have to like transmute, like having some energy that you have to, whatever is with you, next to you, by you, whatever materials you have, like the urgency of needing to like make really calls for, I think, an interdisciplinary practice for me as like someone who's been a mom since I was 19 and working and a student and all these things at once. So
yeah, that's important. You know, and we talk about interdisciplinary, and I think another thing that we are thinking about are the artists that we admire so much. And we're going to highlight some of those artists that we kind of talked about in our one-on-one conversation. Y'all, look, me and Ricky had the best conversation on an early Sunday morning. Was it Sunday? It was great. It was great. And I just thought it was such a powerful talk. But we talked about this idea of Ricky and I being in conversation. What was interesting was that we were talking about our work and how even some of the meanings and intention in our own practices overlapped with one another, right? So being in conversation is something that I thought was really important. So in conversation with, and the reason why I put that here is because I feel like we are always talking to other Black artists in some kind of way. And I feel like this is one of Ricky's beautiful, powerful pieces. When I saw this piece, I was completely taken aback because it had such an influence on me, because I thought immediately it gave me Gordon Park vibes, right? But it also gave me Carrie Mae Weems vibes. And what I loved about this too is that, you know, this matriarch is staring us right in our face, fearless. And I want to talk about the juxtaposition of this beautiful Black and white photo. And why did you, because I think people don't realize that we intentionally choose to do a photo in Black and white versus color, because it's saying something and it's serving a greater purpose. So what does that mean? And then also in conjunction with the quote that you chose and the title of it. So
on my screen, I'm not seeing
let me just come back out and then
there we go.
In.
I can see it.
Can you see it? Okay.
So let me just paraphrase the question. I'm trying to remember to slow down. My mind moves so quickly.
That's okay.
So just, you want me to kind of just walk through this piece? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, you know, let's just think about, because again, like I said, it really gave me Carrie Mae Weems vibes. And then we're going to talk about Carrie Mae Weems in just a second, but also the intention of you choosing it to be a monochrome versus a colored photo. And then also this quote is very specific. I'm not sure if that's what your grandmother said. And I wanted to wait until today to ask you, because you didn't have a name. So I'm just assuming that it was her words. So all of those moving parts.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with the image and the because that was a huge conversation. I was working with Danielle Dean at Cranbrook at the time, and I remember asking her, like, does this need to be in color or should it be in Black and white? Because I did shoot it in color. Just thinking about the brain and sensory activity, that's one thing that color can, like, having a grayscale image, or it helps to leave, you know, it leaves more processing power for other things. That's the way I imagine it. It's where I'm just like not excited about all these like really lush colors. I can dive into a bit more details, and also time. I think it has a way of shifting the way we understand time in an image, especially if the image is going to be like really vibrant or not colored in a specific way, because color can shift the way that we see time too in an image, but people automatically think about something as like past or archival when it is not in color. And I think that just has to do with the way we're conditioned to think about black and white images, because it also like will reference like silver, or I'm sorry, that's like a techie word, but film, like black and white film, which is the, you know, the original form of image making. So yeah, I was thinking about that a lot, because I do think about time a lot in my images. So I wanted this to kind of sit in what I call like a spatio-temporal collapse, like past, present, and future together. And so the image, I work in threes, I work in triptychs a lot. This is a triptych for me, even though there's just two, like there's the panel and the image. The title also is the other part of the triptych, which I'll get to, but I'm gonna move over to the quote, which is, you know, we're talking about being in conversation with, and the practice of working with and after. I got that directly from Alexis Pauline Gumbs, like Black feminist, like breathing chorus, or Black, I don't want to say it wrong, sorry Alexis, but she talks about working with and after a lot. And this is a Bell Hooks quote by way of Simone Brown's text, Dark Matters, which is about the racialization of surveillance. So this piece has a lot to do with surveillance, and me using the camera as a tool has a lot to do with surveillance and the politics of looking and being looked at. And all of this actually I was able to like articulate I had been thinking about these things, but this was the piece where it all like really started to make sense for me. So the part of this book where the text comes from, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm not at home. If I was at home, I'd just be grabbing my little things and pointing to stuff. But in this book, she's referring to the gaze and thinking about how there was a point in time where Black women in America, like post-slavery, you were like working a lot in domestic jobs in other folks' houses, and you were not supposed to look people directly in their eyes. And so not only will I want my look to shift reality. So like, not only am I gonna look you in your face, but this act of freedom, the way that is archived in my body, the way that it will be passed down to my, and you know, my daughter's daughters is going to literally shift reality. So this image of my grandma, she does not like being photographed, like at all. But for whatever, you know, on this day, I was practicing trying to use this camera, this pretty techie camera. And I was like, oh, Granny, let me take a picture of you. It was shortly after her 103rd birthday. And you can see the candles in the back. And she was like, okay, what do you want me to do? And I was like, do whatever you want to do. And so she chose to sit here, and she made this space. And I didn't even plan on using this image. I was just practicing, and I love thinking about it in that way. I was just practicing. I was just in my practice. And so when you bring Carrie Mae Weems into the picture, it's funny because I was sitting with the Kitchen Table series at Detroit. Taylor Aldridge had curated, I can't remember the name of the show, but she curated a show, had Lauren Simpson's work and Carrie Mae Weems' work in the show. And I sat there on the bench after I was just dealing with like the camera I'm referring to got stolen. That's a whole nother story and all this stuff. And I was kind of crying. And I was like, Auntie Carrie, like, what do you want me to, what am I supposed to do? I don't have any work for my thesis. It's like, I have to submit something to the museum in like 2 weeks or at the end of the week, something wild, a wild timeline. And she was just like, what about that image of your grandma? And I'm like, I don't even know what that looks like. I was just practicing using this camera. And so I thought about that, and I thought about what happens when we're making without thinking about making for or considering like what it needs to be and just allowing it to be. So That's a bit on that. And then Amazing Grace, I titled the song Amazing Grace because one, my grandmother would hum it, but two, I was thinking about hymns and like the sonic component of images. And I was also thinking about Negro spirituals and these technologies of escape. And so I like to think about images mapping in that way. So yeah, I was hoping or aspiring that when other people see this work, because I name a lot of my pieces after hymns, that they can hear. And it's kind of like, if you know, you know, you know, but if you don't know, you know, you just don't know, but you know.
Period. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I love Parables of Light, and just the whole series is just so interesting. And I love what you talked about. I mean, even just talking about how you had a conversation with Carrie Mae Weems, right? So it's almost like this energy, you know, that was taken from you. Cause you know, when you get property stolen, come on, give me a break, girl. I just like be breaking down. I get mad, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm everything. But the fact that you spun this thing on its head and you were able to make something so beautiful. Thinking about the Carrie Mae Weems series that I felt was in conversation, right? That's what I always say is like, whenever work is similar, it's nothing like everybody's doing a different thing, but it's a conversation that's happening. So Carrie Mae Weems did From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried, 1995 to 96, three toned prints. And I felt like when I saw those pieces and I was able to see, I think a great deal of them in person when I was in New York, and I stood there for so long. And I know that sometimes we see these images just, you know, during Black History Month or whatever, you know, people post them on social media or whatever, and it almost loses its potency because people post them so much. It's almost like, you know, again, the whole idea of putting these videos of Black people being murdered by the police is like they want you to not pay attention after a while. But for me, I'm always awestruck. I'm always going to stand there. I'm always going to look at our ancestors. I'm going to honor them. So with that said, I'm thinking about the work that you did for Parables of Light and this. Talk to me about how this may have influenced you in any kind of way, and how do you see these two series in conversation?
When I seen this in the slideshow, this beautiful slideshow you prepared, thank you so much for this. I hadn't realized how much, and we were just talking about this before we got on the call, how much this particular body of work, I've always loved this body of work, but I was like, whoa, this is like, yo, this is like very adjacent. Yes. But the way that Carrie pairs text with image, I always thought was really clever. Like the linguistic message has to give us something that the image doesn't. For me, like I don't want it to reinforce what we already have. I want it to be able to direct the conversation that the image is generating in this. Like it's the space in between those two things that I think that she plays with really well. And that's what I like to do, like with my work. You know, she's taking these images and what they were intended to do, which is just in the way that like Black bodies have been commodified in America. It's like to put it in an image as an object, that's something that's also, especially when you are making work in the art industrial complex, like you really have to be able to like guide that conversation around the body and also have some type of way of mitigating the consumption from the viewer.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, like, I don't know. Yeah.
You know, it makes me think about the book by Harriet Washington, because I chose this specific one because I wanted to talk about Harriet Washington's book, Medical Apartheid. And it's basically the experimentation on Black bodies from colonial times to present. And I want to reinforce to present because I think some people don't think that experimentation on Black bodies is still happening. It is. You know, if you think about that young boy, and I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Johnson, how he was rolled up in the mat down south. And they were like, oh, he climbed in there to get his gym shoe. And I'm like, that don't sound right. But then all his organs are missing. Like, so all of these different things are still happening in some kind of way. So you became a scientific profile, right? So if you want me to, I can go ahead and click on this link. Well, let me just go here because I already brought up, because I be doing what I be doing. I brought up the Carrie Mae Weems. And let me just, can you see that?
I'm still in the PDF.
Okay, so let me just push escape. Let me just stop share. I feel like whenever I have to switch a screen, it's going to, I got to bring it back up and bring it back down. But
no, absolutely.
give me some time, y'all. We on it.
Yeah,
But
no,
here we are with Carrie Mae Weems. And let me do the share. Sorry. Dang, come on, don't act up. All right, so let me do the screen share now. All right. Can y'all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so let me just make this bigger. Because you talked about when you first saw the images as well,
Mm-hmm.
and how, and I love what you said is that the language cannot just be reinforcing what we already see, but it needs to be something else. Like, of course it is. It's saying something, but it's saying something else. And I don't know if I have the right words. It's not fitting in my mouth, but I'm sure it can fit easier in your mouth. What was this like as you journeyed through this over and over again? I'm sure.
It continues to shift because I've seen it in other arrangements. I've seen, like, I obsessed with it online when I first seen it. Actually, this work and I feel like the kitchen table series work was the first work that I seen that made me say, I'm gonna commit to the practice of photography as an artist, because what it has the ability to do. Like this, I'm gonna try to sort this out, because I didn't know that I was thinking this at the time. I'm just looking at the time, I'm like, yo, something's happening. Cause I was 19, 20. I'm like, something's happening. One, I don't know what's happening. Two, but it feels like it could feel a bit haunting, but it feels like also there's a language of care and looking that is really specific. Because so this image on the furthest one on the right was one of the first ones that was shown to me in undergrad. And so that's like a really specific context of being in a room full of like mostly like white folks and this white professor showing me this work and feeling like really kind of vulnerable in that. But looking at this and thinking, can we make it bigger so I can see the text? Can we like do a little zoom? I ain't got my glasses. I left them in LA. That's good. But yeah, like looking at this and what she was able to do with changing the color and really what is she saying with that color? And then changing the circle, like instead of having like a rectangle, she made it a circle. And I'm really trying to just recall that moment of looking at these. But knowing that I was knowing something that I didn't know that I was knowing in that moment. And then to like now be here and realize like, oh, these are Louis Agassiz photos. These are not photos that Carrie Mae Weems took. No one wanted to say that, okay, Louis Agassiz was taking these images to affirm that Black folks were not like less than human. And so being in this new space where it's like, yeah, we're not here to affirm our humanity. We're here to call into question the pre-existing notion of what human is, which I think Carrie was doing with these images.
Yes.
So yeah, that's
yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
No, and I think it's brilliant. Sometimes even I can get so overwhelmed because I'm thinking so much about what's happening with the work and what it's saying to me and how it's influencing me. And I can get tongue-tied, and I know what I know, but I can't put it into words because I think sometimes it's just, I'm so struck in a way that the only way that I can respond or, um, give some type of input or come into the conversation is just by doing the work. And for you, Ricky, I believe that, and I'm going to go back to sharing the screen with Ricky's work, is that you did the work, and in response to the feeling that you had, right? So I'm just going to go back up to your piece, which is so incredibly powerful just to see these two pieces, right? You see this woman who became a scientific profile. And I don't know what your grandmother may have ever went through, but I know she was 103 years old, baby. So that means she went through some things. She's seen some things. She experienced some things. Racism, she definitely knows that it can roll off of her tongue very easily. So all of those different experiences are wrapped up in her in a different kind of way. But these two women, right? Yes. Okay. Because we can stay there for a long time, but let's move on. But I want to just say, like, I love the reason why I put these two pieces together is because they're in conversation, but also Black people, abracadabra, bitch, we are magic. Talk to me about this, girl.
Okay. And thank you for putting those pieces in conversation. That's a whole writing I have to do. So thank you, Danielle. But so this piece, no one ever really asked me about this piece, and I never really talk about this piece, but I think it's time to like bring it back. But when I made this piece, it was during the time where Black Girl Magic, the hashtag, was trending, and I searched it on Instagram, and what came up was, lots of CEOs, multi-degree Black women, which is dope. But there were a lot of voices being left out of the discourse. And like, we were just talking about, like, I love doing some ghetto shit. So like, also at the same time, I was at Cranbrook, and I had just had my son, Cameron, and I had a C-section. I was dealing with like a lot of personal things, and people kept saying like, you're so amazing. I don't know how you do it. This is incredible. You are magical, all these things. And I'm just hanging in there. And you see me in this body as, superhuman and all these things, but, I'm just as vulnerable and soft as like the next person. So partially in response to that, partially in response to me thinking about like, what is the magic? Like, what actually is the magic? Yes, we're magical, but not without all these other things, like being like, yes, we beautiful and we fly, but there's more to the magic than, like you were saying about the bios, like there's more to the magic than accolades. Like, like the hood is where the innovation comes from, and we were not considered, we were not, not we, but like, the way that it was framed through social media, like those things were not being considered. And as someone who grew up, like I didn't have money, and that really informed the way that I think about the things that I do today. That when you have 5 things and you got to make 100 things out of those same 5 things, like you learn alchemy, like it's just a part of who you are. So that's why the period is extra big, like not the font side. It's like period.
And I love everything you said. I mean, because it is true. And I think even sometimes we do it to ourselves where, again, it goes back to this whole thing that I think is rooted in slavery. Dr. Joy Leary talks about it a lot when she talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Or post-traumatic slave disorder, and how, all of these kind of conversations and things can come out of slavery. I don't think people really can say Black girl magic. It has this connotation that is from there, but it's this thing where we are supposed to cook, clean, take care of the kids, mop, do all these magical things that what they considered were mammies, but were our ancestors would have to do for white families and all of this feed their babies all these kind of things. Oh, she's so strong. Oh, she's so invincible. Oh, she's so this. That woman was tired. She probably wanted to go home and see her kids. She probably wanted to grind up some glass and put that shit in the master's food so he can die, and then she can move on. So it's all of these different things when it comes to magic. Magic is not just associated with our Blackness, but it's associated with so much more than that, our womanhood, et cetera. And I'm not saying that it's not associated with that, but I think when people say it, and sometimes when other people hear it, they're just associating it with Blackness. Oh, because you're Black, you're magic. Okay, if I was magic, I would use a wand and get rid of racism, get rid of all these fucking cops. I mean, but that's not happening, right? So like, I think that what you're saying with that, and especially with what you experienced while you were, first of all, in grad school, you had a baby, like that is incredible. But at the same time, I think, Mama Sabrina said in the comments, it's okay not to be okay as a Black woman. And I think people don't really address that, and it's okay to rest. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I got to be gentle with myself. So I love that. So let's move on to spirituality, which I think is a huge thing for both of us, right? I mean, we talked extensively about this, both raised in the church, right? Pastor's niece over here had to sing every week, right? So you already know that too. You had to do the same thing, playing the instruments, etc. Can sing, came from a singing family, all of that. One of the famous quotes that I love so much that speaks to me, and I write it over and over again. It's on my altar table. It's everywhere. I always say, Zora, Zora, I adore you. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. And that's from their eyes, we're watching God. And just let that sit with you, and apply that to your personal life. If there's something that you're like, why did that happen? Or why somebody acting up? You may not know today or tomorrow, but you may know some years away. And I think the answer always comes at the right time. But thinking about this piece, right? And the spirituality that's here, of course, somebody can say the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, but there's so much more that's happening that we're not looking at just the tangible things that's happening. What are the spiritual elements that's happening in this piece?
Okay, so let me see. There's two pieces with this. Okay, the other one is my cup running over, and this one is God's going to trouble the water. I was just about to say, I had a praying grandmother. I have a piece titled that, but it's something that, I feel like I hear a lot of folks say a lot, and I didn't really realize how those prayers were like carrying me in a real way, like after my grandma passed, and just like all the things that should have, torn me asunder were the things that really shaped me in a specific way. And so God's going to trouble the water. I think about it akin to like the scripture that says, thou shalt not touch my anointing, like being covered, being prayed for, being protected. And so this piece, sometimes I'm like really too honest in like the wrong moments, but this is one of my pieces. I just don't love this piece. It needed to happen, and then I was in a moment where I decided to show it, and I was like, oh, I wish I could take that back. And so now I'm like, okay, we need to sit with the work longer before we show it. But this piece was almost formulaic. It was like, okay, kitchen, multiple selves. We want to work with water as a signifier, because I have been doing that. But there's something that's still not all the way there for me, just looking at it again. But, the water for me is symbolic of a lot of things. I think about, you're talking about slavery. I think about Christina Sharp's In the Wake, being in the wake of that, the tread behind the ship in the water, that holy water, Espiritu Santo, all the water that we have being all the water we will ever have. Like, so, space-time, is it like part of like the signifier of water, this really like fluid thing, and libation ritual, and offering. So all of those things were like a part of the water. And so one of the questions that is, who is this water for? Where did this water come from? you know, who's handing the water to whom. And the other thing about this piece is my body, like my face is not showing, because I like to think about like sometimes the flesh as like this condition, you know what I mean? You know, sometimes like the body, the flesh is just animated by the spirit. And sometimes I think the way, like something about like ego and conduit, and something about that is, you know, me covering myself. And also sometimes people are just not allowed to see me in that way if I decide so. And so you're talking about like slaves grinding up the glass. It's like God's going to trouble the water. Like I'm going to be protected. Like this water, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like this is not a piece that I have talked about yet. So
no, it doesn't make so much sense. But I think, you know, it's interesting when we look at our work and we like, it ain't serving what I wanted to serve, but it served so much for me, because what I was thinking about also with this water, immediately I'm thinking about, you know, when they use water, especially on altar table, as a way, like it's a conduit to speak to your ancestors. It's like that mirror. But also I'm thinking about the gold rims around the glasses. So immediately my mind goes to, oh yeah, because, you know, me and you, we talked before, because I always talk about how I'm like, you know, I'm somewhere in between Proverbs 31 and Rihanna any day. Okay. Or Little Kim sometimes while you playing. So I'm just saying, like, you know, I feel like all of these different elements and these moving parts are present in this particular piece. It speaks to me. So, you know, it's interesting that sometimes we will look at our work and we are very critical about it, but then somebody else can look at it and it can change their whole lives. So, I love that you said, I love the honesty that you have in looking at this piece with us, but I get it. And I think it's beautiful.
But thank you for that. I'm gonna say this,
yeah.
all those multiple glasses are just that, what you were seeing. Like those are all like representative of like, if I was pouring a glass for all of the ancestors that are with me. So you got it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That makes me okay with it.
Yes. This piece, oh my gosh. I felt so moved by this. And I think I asked you about like, where is this for sale? So like One Glad Morning, a part of Shrine and Saint. We talked about it, but I don't know if the audience knows exactly how this piece has come about. Talk to us about the beauty and the mourning of this piece.
Ooh. I'm happy to be in this company. So much gratitude for that, because I no longer show this work. I consider taking it off of my website, because it is a very sacred kind of work. But in short, this work was made after my grandmother passed, and that was a really spiritual kind of journey for me. It was in the early springtime, and this sounds so strange, but I have been dealing with my plants a lot, and trying to grow things and dealing with the soil, and I kept having this like urge to like taste it. I was going places and like taking my shoes off and putting my feet in the grass, trying to get that like electromagnetic earth energy and just like grounding myself. I just really had this desire to be, you know, close to the earth. And I called my mom and I was just like, Mom, you think I'm crazy? Like, I just don't want to be in some dirt. Like the dirt is calling me. And she started telling me the story of this man who had to go lay atop of someone else's grave to receive his anointing. And I didn't think a ton about it. I went to visit my grandmother's grave with my cousin. And I happened to have my stuff in my trunk, which usually I shoot in my home. I think, oh, you know what? I have been shooting out by this river by my house with my friend Taylor. And so I had my stuff in my trunk, and I don't usually shoot outside. And I get there, I get to Memorial Gardens, specifically the Garden of Freedom, which is the name of the space in which my grandmother is buried. I get there and her grave, like the plot was looking like this. And it just I was like, that's what it is. You know, had to taken an offering, taken a libation, and I did this, I made this work. And then, I sat with it for a while, but it felt appropriate for the show that we did in Detroit with Carrie Mae Weems and some of who are now some of my closest friends and really family. A lot of them are here right now with me in Houston. So it felt right to show the work in that space with the Car Center and with the folks who are going to be there. That piece was in a body of work called Shrine and Saint. Shrine being like a holy place marked by something, and then saint being someone like acknowledged as holy, after death, or someone who is like in heaven. So I was just asking myself, where Granny was at, like where is Granny at? And so, multiple places was the answer. I don't know, is that
That's incredible. No, that's beautiful. And I went to the next slide because
Mhm,
you talked about this space.
mhm,
And, I feel like when I create the type of body work that I create, I feel like, again, we are in conversation just because, and I can't wait to hang out with you some more. But the idea of when you come into a space, especially when I'm revering my ancestors, I want people to take off their shoes when they come to my exhibition because you're walking on holy ground. So I feel like I probably would have came out of my shoes in this exhibition. I didn't get a chance to see it because I was on the East Coast, but this is beautiful. How did you feel when people were walking around this space? And not that we need to be judgmental, but it's like,
mhm,
what was that like? Because I know you hold this very dear.
mhm. So this was my solo show at North 22 Gallery in Ipsy, which I had in Ipsy specifically because, that's where I'm from, that's where my grandma lived, and that's where my people are. And I wanted my people to have access to that without, going through a bunch to get there. And so it happened to fall on the weekend of my grandmother's birthday. And there was an altar in the front of the space to
Mm.
honor her. But I sat in that space and I had conversation, and was just, just a kind of like small little like ritual moment before the show opened. And it was okay. I was like, you know what? It's okay, because this is the closing of that work. So this was after this show. I was like, okay, I don't know if I want to show these other works. I wouldn't show those with anyone, maybe in another solo show or something. But anyway, it felt okay. It felt okay. And seeing people in that space, someone in that space had just recently lost someone.
Mm.
And they came up to me after the show, after they looked at the show, and they was like, thank you for that reminder. Thank you for that reminder of like, these things are not final. Like, thank you for that reminder. So I think it was okay. I think it was necessary. I pray that it was healing. Especially at this time, there was like a ton of, and I can't think of another way to say this because I'm just have a lot of thoughts going on, but like it was a ton of like cops killing Black people for sport, like in this moment. And there was a lot of grief too. And so this, looking back, I'm like, this was definitely like a response to this, like, you live a specific way when you're consistently afraid of dying. But what does it look like to understand death as a transition and not,
Mm.
you know what I mean? What does it look like to live when you're not afraid to die? So those were the things that I was thinking about when this show came together.
Mm. I love that. And kind of to wrap up the spirituality section that we were talking
Mhm,
about, there were so many of these beautiful pieces, and we're going back to Parables of Light here, down
mhm,
through the years. And when I read that title, I heard the song. It just, and I literally sang the entire song while I was looking
mhm,
at this piece, almost as a way of honoring your intentions, and casting the space in which I was viewing this piece as holy, as reverent in its own
mhm,
way. So, and I'm thinking about this, you're snapping peas, you're snapping the string beans, and how the
Mhm.
kitchen space itself was a holy space. I know in my grandmother's house, that's where the women would go and talk, and they'll talk about some really deep things, some very deep things. How did all this come together? Because I know you talked about this being a trifecta here. So how
Mhm.
did this come together for you?
Yeah. That is one of the songs that, okay. So there are a lot of things for me that function as image because of their ability to call other images into the room. So the snapping of the peas is one of the images that comes with the archive of that song for me. Um, so that's where the image came from. I can hear it right now too. It's actually kind of like distracting me. But peace that surpass all understanding, like these are all in conversation with technologies of escape and dark surveillance. So those are all modes of that and methods of that. Sorry about that. Yeah, so those are all modes of that and methods of that. We have dormant languages in our body
Mm-hmm.
that, that I think depending on what we engage with, the drums is a really good example of that. There's no way I'm gonna hear a djembe and my hips not gonna do something. So, something. And so I think like showing these images of these nuanced gestures is just a moment where I'm not giving away too much to everybody, but like, and I really appreciate having this conversation with you because the way that the work resonates with you is the way that the work is intended to do. Like it's just an artifact of the practice, because I was actually really was making green beans. I was like actually doing this, and I was telling my daughter, I was like, come on in this kitchen and help me. And those are the moments where the history is passed down. Those are the moments where the like art, and as a kid, you're like, Granny, you done told the story 100 times. I'm not trying to hear all this and why I can't go outside and play. I have to do these things, but like, these are the moments. And I said to my daughter, I'm gonna have to start putting her on my things, because I was like, come here real quick, go get my tripod. Like, I'm about to set this up, take this image. So, yeah, I know I'm like kind of all over the place with that, but yeah, it was in the moment. A lot of my work just happens in the moment. And it it's about so many things. It's about all those things, because it can be something different thresholds. That's the word. There's multiple thresholds. Like you might understand snapping peas as something that's relaxing. You might understand it as something laborious, but then you might understand it as something spiritual. Like the way that you interface with time is going to change the way you see this work, all of my work. Like if you interface with time as nonlinear, then you're going to get it on a different level. Like that's another threshold. So yeah, I made this work during my residency at Darkroom Detroit. And it was again thinking about, I have been really like going through it. I was working like 40 hours a week at the hospital, teaching a night class, also trying to do this residency, I was like doing like a residency and a fellowship at the same time. And so it was just like, this is my practice. This is just an art, like my work is an artifact of like that response you were talking about earlier in the talk. Like this is me responding to all of the intentional things that I'm taking in, and then just being in practice in my daily life.
Oh my gosh, your work it moves me in such a deep way. It's almost like I'm like, Ricky girl, let's do a call and response show. Like, I mean, because I feel like just all of what you're saying. And again, I think the idea of looking at an image and automatically hearing like a 70 voice choir in my head singing down through the years without any piano, just the foot stomp. That's what we did at our church. You know what I mean? Like just recalling this moment. I can feel the air. I can taste, the dust that was in the church. I know it was over on Burns Avenue, so all of these different things are coming to mind as I'm looking at this piece, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
So I want to say that, in conjunction with what you said just a little bit earlier, is that, we're documenting these things, and however you receive it, whether it's linear or on a different kind of ancestral plane, but we are archivists. And I think that, a lot of times people may look at photographers as if they just snap pictures. Oh, okay, y'all not putting in no real work, but it's like, no, honey, everything that you feel, we are setting up, we're contemplating, we're thinking about. And not only that, but if we have the dark room as a part of our practice, that is sanctuary in and of itself. We're taking great care and making sure the lighting is right, et cetera. So yes, amen to everything you said. So we're going to move into this next section, Black ancestral vibes, all that. You talked substantially about your grandmother, but it was something that you said in the conversation that we had on Sunday morning, because I felt like we had this little church session between the two of us. But you said to me, you were like, I thought about my grandmother. She's always been my grandmother, but I did not, I don't even know like all the things that she may have experienced as a young woman. And when I look at this piece and I'm looking at these dates, it's so much that's not said. Where that dove is, it's so much more that should be registered. She needs much more concrete in order to carve her story there. How are you? I know you said that she taught to you, when you would go in the kitchen and tell you stories. How is she a part of your practice today? And this can probably be so loaded. And if you're uncomfortable answering this question, please let me know and we can move on. But yeah.
No, that's a really relevant question, especially being post Mother's Day. I've been missing her a lot here in the last couple of weeks. But my grandmother is a part of my everyday, and a lot of this, most of the work that we looked at was me really like seeing that for the first time after she was my friend here, my homie, my uncle, I call him Uncle, Victor Lee Givens. We were on the phone one day and he was like, Granny is not Granny until Granny is gone. Like, then we start digging through Granny's archives. Then we start really thinking about what Granny said. Then we start looking at old images. And I have a picture of my grandmother from her 100th birthday, where she was receiving an award for being the oldest woman in Washtenaw County. And she was clapping. But I look at that image every morning when I wake up. I look at that image and I think about my responsibility to the work that she's already done. And that's not to say my responsibility to work. It's also my responsibility to rest, within that. It's also my responsibility to enjoy life. My responsibility to my children, thinking about the kind of grandmother that she was to me, my responsibility to my mother, thinking about the way that my mother revered my grandmother. And so this particular, just looking at this wife, mother, and grandmother, and really thinking about the way that I exist in the world now, like I've been a mom for 12 years. And so it was around that like 9th, 10th year where it really like set into me that these dynamics between like the women around you in the care system, because there also is, without being said, like an absence of men, masculine energy in these works. Oftentimes I feel like Black women's care comes from other Black women. And so I still feel my grandmother caring for me all the time. Like her, her prayers are with me on the daily. My grandmother loved the 23rd of Psalms. And that's something that I just keep around my house and my studio. Ashe, Audrey Lee Weaver, but yeah.
That's beautiful. I love it. And here she is with, is this an aunt or is this her sister?
Yeah, okay, I forgot these images are on my website. Yes, these are, that's her little sister, Ruth Jean Murray. Ashe Ruth, Auntie Ruth. But yes, this was at my grandma's 100th birthday party. You
want to sit with this? Okay, go ahead.
This I'm thinking about your work as we're here in conversation, and your work as this like response to the thing that's happening in that moment, and this really like being keyed in a specific way and seeing the light when it happens and getting that like kind of instant moment. And these are images that I was not considering myself as a contemporary, like fine art photographer. I was just really learning how to use this camera. This is back when I was shooting Nikon. So, I really was just like, no, I'm just playing. But I was just wanting to hold these moments. And so this work that's in this series for me is like the work that was happening before I cared about what the work looked like. It was more about being an archivist, being the person to hold the stories, to hold the histories, because there's a responsibility that comes with that too, because you can give the images along, but if you're not giving along the oral histories and stuff, like these things become completely abstracted. Yes. So I was that for a while, just being like, okay, Erica got a camera. So that, that's what my family calls me, Erica. Erica got a camera. Erica, bring your camera to this. And I did it anyway. From the time I was just like 16 and up, I had my little point and shoot. I was just always like, so those are the images that I love the most, because they don't have the responsibility of thinking about composition and megapixels and how I'm gonna print it afterward and how I'm gonna present it formally and blah, 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 blah. So like really being in practice, and I was saying that earlier, just with everything like going on in Houston and just like being here, like that is the work for me, being in practice and allowing the images to happen.
I love that. That's beautiful. And to me, this leads into what we talked about, Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, right? And you specifically pulled a quote for us to kind of like dissect and discuss. And I just want to read this in honor of you and the work that you've done. Again, we love Alice Walker. She is queen. But the quote is, "Some of them, without a doubt, were our mothers and grandmothers in the still heat of the post-Reconstruction South. This is how they seem to Jean Toomer. Exquisite butterflies trapped in an evil honey, oh my God, toiling away their lives in an era, a century that did not acknowledge them, except as the mule of the world. They dreamed dreams that no one knew, not themselves, in any coherent fashion, and saw visions no one could stand. They wandered or sat about the countryside, crooning lullabies to ghosts and drawing the mother of Christ in charcoal on courthouse walls. They forced their minds to desert their bodies, and their striving spirits sought to rise like frail whirlwinds from the hard red clay. And when those frail whirlwinds fell in scattered particles upon the ground, no one mourned. Instead, men lit candles to celebrate the emptiness that remained, as people do who enter a beautiful but vacant space to resurrect a God." Sis, you picked this. Don't make me cry, but like, what is this? What are you saying to me, right?
I was a part of a cohort, a group show in Virginia titled In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. We built armor. It was curated by Mahari Chabera, and so as the curator, she sent us all a copy of Alice Walker's compilation of womanist prose. And I chose to read In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. Like, oh, obvious choice for me. But, there's so much in this quote for me. So let me just start at the top. My maternal lineage is a thing for me. So like keying into asking the questions of, because this was after my grandmother's passing, and really, questioning what the dynamics of her life looks like in a Reconstruction South. Like, we're having conversations now about existing in a Black feminine body, but like, I can't imagine what it was like. It is such a privilege to just be sitting here having a conversation about making stuff, about making art, because I feel like I need to do it. You know, it's a privilege for me to just be like, yeah, y'all, I'm in Houston hanging out with my art friends because we convened to do some stuff. Like, that was not always, you know, a choice. And I'm there's gratitude every day in that for me. And I think about like my mom can draw her ass off. My mom can, you know, she could sing, she could dance. And she didn't have the time, the opportunity to access to those things. And so, you know, this was a huge part of that. And my mom is here to tell her story, but my grandmother never said, I could do this and I could do that. And I, you know, so all of those things. And I think about how that might drive you crazy, you know, not being able to produce. Like, we are creators, we go through labor, we get, like, we birth things into this world. And so I was really thinking about that. And they dream dreams that no one knew, not themselves, in any coherent fashion, and saw visions no one could stand. I don't know if I talked about this in this talk already, but I think about language as the thing that tethers us to a shared reality. But then there are other worlds and other realities that we can tether ourselves to, quite by, like, you know, Danielle, we have a certain vernacular that we talk in where we say a lot of stuff that we don't even have to say because of, you know, the language that we use. And so, you know, I question, like, what is the world that, you know, that tethers us to? What is the reality that tethers us to? And so, because we create language with our work, if they were not making work and creating languages to, like, share, you know, there's this isolation when we're not tethering to the same world. There's a certain type of isolation, and not that they weren't doing it, because they were in their own ways. And Alice Walker really reminds us that, you know, even if they were tending someone else's gardens, it was their hands that grew those flowers. Like, that was their practice. They made practice out of, you know, what they could. And you know, there's conversation in here too about you know, our African spiritual practices within this context. You know, they drawing the Mother of Christ in charcoal on courthouse walls. I'm not going to say a ton about that, because, you know, if you know, you know.
No, you know.
But they you know, like, it really deals with also the way that, like, Black women's successes and strengths are, and I'm thank you for, like, shaping this for this specific audience for Womxnhouse, because there's a real conversation again about, like, the care and trust. Like, if someone can't see you, then they can't care for you in the way that you need to be cared for. If you can't communicate in a specific language, so like, if you have to constantly be translating things to someone, then, like, how can they care for you? But instead, it's just like, oh, mother was a this and a that, mother was that, but, like, was mother cared for? Like, we don't need to, like, the idea of men lit candles to celebrate the emptiness that remain, as people do who enter a beautiful but vacant space to resurrect to God. What does that mean to celebrate after the fact? Like, what does it mean to not be present with Black women in their gardens and caring for them, and also tending to that work with them, or providing the support to tend to that work? So this, like, understanding, like, this like, you have to have some type of spiritual practice. Yeah. The practice is spiritual, first of all, but you have to have some type of grounding in that to even, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, my grandmother used to always say, and I think it's a Bible verse, she was like, you can't talk spiritual things to people who aren't spiritual. And I used to be like, okay, grandma, you know, so just understanding that. And I think also in that last part, you know, something that you said, and I'm just playing off of what you implied, is the idea of, give us our flowers now. Like, I know you're taking those flowers out of the garden that we grew, but show that appreciation while we are present in the now. You know, don't just light the candles over our graves. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there's so much that's loaded there. And this, oh my God, like, when I first read it, you know, of course I had to turn off the lamp, and I just had to sit in the darkness and be still, because there's so much here that, you know, again, yes, it is in me, but I am very much just like you. I'm like knowing all my ancestors. I'm tap into them. I have like this obsession with my ancestry genealogy. I'm doing the tree. We got like 4,000 people in that bad boy. So I'm very much deep into that. And I know who my ancestors are, the women, and they are incredibly powerful. And it reaches back to them. And I'm thinking also about the idea that some of these women did not read or write. So they couldn't document the things that we had. And they couldn't afford a camera, but they made sure they, were doing hair and also, doing roots and spiritual things and healing herbs and, what you need you a gree bag. I got you, so it's all of that that's here. And I wonder what dreams they dreamt for me. Mm-hmm. It's all of that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but
no, I'm with you. All
right. So let's go into this. And this is another piece I thought was incredible because you talked about the idea of being in the moment and capturing history, being an archivist. And I feel like this is a part of that. And this is also a part of that quote. Even though she's not looking directly at this young, beautiful little girl, but it's almost like this communication here that I feel is gorgeous. And it reminded me of Latoya Ruby Frazier's work, who I love as well. Again, this very visceral, family oriented, environmental, nothing is staged. This is somebody's home, where everything is placed. It is there, not because some, set designer, I love set designers, but no set designer did this. Grandma did this. And there's something incredible about the placement of everything and how they're both looking at us and what that's saying to you. So your work in conversation with Latoya Ruby Frazier's work, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I first of all love Latoya Ruby Frazier, and this is my favorite body of work of hers for I feel obvious reasons. So the image of mine that we looked at, that's my cousin Tony and her daughter. And again, these were just me looking back through archives and being like, I just love the joy that's happening in these images. Black body radiation is, hold on real quick, because I don't want to butcher this. I ain't trying to make nothing up today. Okay. I'm gonna just read y'all this quick definition real quick because I hope this is like a good one, but it's a short one because it's usually a long definition. Black body radiation is the thermal electromagnetic radiation within or surrounding a body of thermodynamic equilibrium with its environment emitted by a Black body. So it's an idealized, opaque, non-reflective body. So it's supposed to emit a perfect energy. And so I'm just thinking about the way that these beautiful Black beings radiate perfectly, and the joy and also the reality. Because another thing that I think about in my work is one, who assigns value and accessibility. So part of looking back at that work is just who am I making work for? I use a lot of mad academic language a lot. Because that's the way that I think through things, but it's important for the work. When you see the work, it doesn't need all that. It doesn't need all that. That's just me, as a theorist. And Latoya Ruby Frazier's work was work for me that before any formal art, because a lot of art does require some type of art education to read, and it's weird because it's for the public. But it was important for me that the work that I was making resonated with the people that I was making it for. Not to say that it's not for everybody, but specifically who was in my heart and on my heart. And Latoya Ruby Frazier's work has always felt like that to me. I can smell it. You know what I mean? I know what this carpet smells like. Yeah. I know, these objects I identify with, and I feel like I'm talking really loud, but I identify with a lot of these objects. And I identify with these folks that okay, that's cousin, that's auntie so-and-so. And so I hadn't really thought about it like that, but her work, so I feel like if we were talking about this like technically informally, because we do have hella photographers on this call, but you see how the foot is cropped like that, that would be considered like a photographic no-no. And so that is something that is like, yeah, cool, but that's not what we're doing. And that's not what we're talking about. And I like to lean into that too, because how much attention am I giving to what's in front of me if I'm giving all my attention to making sure that that foot is in there? Because who told us that that foot had to be in there? Who made up these rules? Anyway, who assigned that value to the image? And so it really was just about the magic of the everyday, because Black women's everyday, the mundane, is like where the magic sits for me. So Latoya's Ruby Fraser's work, specifically this body of work, was just like hella magical to me. So yeah.
All right, so I know we are limited on time. I'm gonna move through these next slides really quickly. But I kind of wanted us to sit with this little part. So we are at the end, right? That we talked about Toni Morrison a little bit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and stop sharing because you guys never can see. But I want us to end with this because I felt like what she was saying was so powerful, which I think in essence, people thought it was just like, oh, she beasted that woman out. But I'm like, it's so much more than that. It's like so much more than that. So let me just go ahead and share this screen so you guys can see. And we're only going to play like less than 2 minutes of it. But here we are. Can everyone see? Okay.
We can't hear it.
Oh, so I probably got to plug this. Sorry.
This is shocking. It's always shocking.
Can you hear?
And I'm being shocked. I'm never going to become immune. I think that's a kind of failure to see so much of it that you die inside. I want to be surprised and shocked every time.
You have in your writing certainly marginalized whites. Why are they of no particular interest to you, or seemingly no particular interest?
Well, I was interested in another kind of literature that was not just confrontational, Black versus white. I was really interested in Black leadership. And I wanted to do, I think, the allegory or the parallel is Black music, which is as splendid and complicated and wonderful as it is, because its audience was within its primary audience. The fact that it has become universal, worldwide, anyone, everyone can play it, and it has evolved, is because it wasn't tampered with and editorialized within the community. So I wanted the literature that I wrote to be that way. I could just go straight to where the soil was, where the fertility was in this landscape. And also, I wanted to feel free not to have the white gaze in this place that was so precious to me, which is the work.
And you will maintain this safe place for yourself, for your art? You don't think you will ever change and write books that incorporate white lives into them substantially?
I have done.
In a substantial way?
You can't understand how powerfully racist that question is, can you? Because you could never ask a white author, when are you going to write about Black people? Whether he did or not, or she did or not. Even the inquiry comes from a position of being in the center.
And being used to being in the center.
And being used to being in the center. And saying, you know, is it ever possible that you will enter the mainstream? It's inconceivable that where I already am is the mainstream.
So let me just plug back in my microphone so I can just talk back. Can you hear me? Okay, so hello, I want to I want to hear your thoughts specifically on that, because I feel like what you said about Latoya Ruby Frazier, the foot being cut off and all of that, is exactly how everything that Toni Morrison is assigning to authorship. Like, as an author, I feel like we have to have these conversations about our work as a photographer, as a painter, as a drawer, whatever. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I would pretty much mirror that exactly, like, because a part of that too is one of the things in the way that Toni Morrison writes inspires a lot of people to say, let me just write down some things, let me write. And so I think too a lot about like two images that I did last year. I took with my iPhone of my daughter's because it was happening and that's what I had. Mm-hmm. And but I like to imagine that other people will say, okay, I don't need a full frame to be able to be a photographer. And also, to whom is the question. So, I really, to respond to the latter part of what she's saying, when I talk about Blackness, it is not in response to whiteness, number one. And then number two, every time I think about doing something or making a decision, I just ask myself, why? I have a whole image that I've shown that the horizon line is just like crooked. But I love the image so much. And I'm like, who told me? Who said that it had to be this way? And so I don't, like, you know what I mean? Who cares? This is my language and this is what feels right in my body. And this is how I'm going to move forward with this tool, because it really, for me, is just a tool of communication that is, the lineage of the technology is what I'm into, not the aesthetics, because our aesthetics has been colonized. Like, our relationship to aesthetics has been colonized. So, yeah.
Brilliant. And I just wanted to end our discussion before we open up the floor to questions, because I know it's so many questions that people have. People have been in the comments, and I love that they're loving this conversation. But I wanted to end with showing Dina Lawson, who is not just a very incredible photographer, but is a beautiful person. I had the opportunity to actually know her, and she's incredible. But what I found to be catching, of course, I'm reading all these articles, right, when they come out, was this: you got the head and then you got the deck. The deck is saying Dina Lawson's regal, loving, unburdened photographs imagine a world in which Black people are free from the distortions of history. And I feel like that is all of us, not just Black people, but people of color, and how we are imagining a world with our free of this distortion. And not that we're trying to rewrite anything, because we can't, and I honestly don't, because that means I'm trying to erase our matriarchs and our patriarchs. But what we're doing is, showing us in a light that's not through the white gaze. We are telling our own stories. I think it's a quote that says, the lion is the one that has the power. And it's the same thing as far as like us writing our own stories. We are our own lions. We don't need anybody interpreting our stories incorrectly. We don't need 1,000 Robert Talents who interpreted, Marie Laveau like completely wrong, right? She can speak for herself, even if she can't write. We know the language. She speaks through us and to us. So anyway, we here for the questions, y'all. Let me shut up. I'm gonna let y'all talk to Ricky, the incredible Ricky Weaver. So I want to open up the floor to anyone. You can please turn on your mic and have that conversation with Ricky now. Anybody? I'm surprised.
I'm gonna say one little small thing that's not really small. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Danielle, for being the moderator, but also understanding the language, because you are also interdisciplinary in your practice. So you understand, as a writer and maker and performer and a child of the church in that way, you understand the language, the coded language, if you know, that Ricky speaks through Ricky's work, right? So I appreciate you posing the questions you did, and then understanding the answer that Ricky gave us, because sometimes there's a lot of heaviness that photographers might use that is a coded language specifically between you and Asia, and do you know what I'm saying? And Ricky, that I don't understand. I do now as a person who reviews portfolios, but there's a coded language of not understanding that it's not always the lens that you use, it's the person who shoots it, right? And I just appreciate that, and that's all I want to say. Everything was amazing today, so thank you both for what you've shared with us. I appreciate it.
Ashe, thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would like to just, thank you all for an amazing conversation as well. Ricky, you said something that really was like, that stood out to me, like who told us, that foot couldn't be cut off, or that horizon line couldn't be crooked. I really appreciate that, because coming through the photography department and all of those, just being a photographer and working in journalism and dealing with all of that, you can kind of limit yourself. Even now, I just recently bought a new iPhone, and I like shooting with my iPhone. I hate carrying a big heavy camera around. I like to be able to be out and just candidly shoot something, or that I see or experience in that moment. So I appreciate you just validating that, because a lot of times we can get stuck in these we can get stuck in like the technique of it all, that we miss out on some real moments.
Yeah.
And I know we got a lot of Womxnhouse artists on here, so please ask some questions while you got Ricky on the phone here, and get it on out. I know y'all see y'all in there.
Yeah. Anyone else? Please jump in. No? Well,
one more question I do have.
Hi.
Maybe Bria's here. Hi, Bria.
I'll go back. Bye.
No, don't go. Come back.
No, go ahead.
Mine is really, really short. So James Vanderzee, who, when I was teaching African American art history, was one of the first known or recorded African American photographers. And then, I moved all the way from Vanderzee to then it was Lorna Simpson. And then, you know what I'm saying? So who would have been, and Carrie Mae Weems, of course, but who would have been female adjacent? I don't know that history, because photography has always been a men's sport, if you will, versus the NBA versus the WNBA. Who would have been the woman who would have taken the daguerreotypes in that particular time, or was that not? I just don't know. We have Edmonia Lewis for sculpture, right?
Right.
But we don't know who was a female photographer in that particular time. Do you guys?
I mean, Danielle or Asia, I don't know if y'all know, but during the daguerreotype time, I don't think I know who that would, and I feel terrible saying this because I'm a photography.
All right, you ain't got
but I
no,
don't.
you're not alone.
Yeah, if that exists, which I know that it does, and I'm thank you for asking me that question, because now I feel like I need to know these things. But I don't know. Do y'all know?
I can't think of anybody offhand. However, I do have a book here from an exhibit called Reflections in Black. It was an exhibition that showed when I was in college, and they do have daguerreotypes in this book. And this is Carrie Mae Weems' work was in there, Gordon Parks, Vanderzee, all of these people were in this exhibit, and I was actually able to handle some of those daguerreotypes when I was working at the DeSable Museum. So I know that there is somebody out there.
It has to
I got
be,
this book, but I will have to, I got the
deep.
book and look in there.
I will say,
Well,
I went to Penumbra Foundation, and that's where I learned how to do tintype and also daguerreotype. I took the courses. That's a part of my practice now, which is such a sacred thing, because when I was doing the research to learn the practice, all I, of course, I'm tapping in because I'm like, who are the Black people, Black, and all you see are these Black women holding babies, white babies, in front of their face, or, they're always the background to a white person's foreground. And it was really interesting because I posted a series, about 30 of them, in my Instagram stories. And at first I was just posting like 2 or 3, and I started getting mad, and I literally posted like 30, and I got inboxes. People were like, I was okay with like the first 2, 3, 5. And then it was like, I couldn't look away. I had to keep looking. Like I was talking to you, Ricky, like I couldn't look away. And they were like, I'm so mad, So when I went into the class, I was thinking about these women and these men, but I did do research to see what woman tintype artist was there. And I, to this day, haven't found one, but, and maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but I think that they may just be there and they don't have the names of these women.
that I think, but I do, Danielle, one of the things that what I'm thinking with what you're saying is, like, I think about Sojourner Truth then. Like Sojourner Truth's carte de visite was her, like, I think of her as the photographer in that image. Like her pose is so specific, the things in her hands are so specific. And then she adds that language, I sell the shadow for substance. It really directs the viewer in that way. So like I have a postcard of that in my studio. And so I put like Sojourner Truth in that like early photographer, someone who was like taking agency of their image and then actually using the money from the carte de visite, for abolition work. So yeah.
Okay, I'm a little ignorant. I don't know what carte de visite. I don't even know how you say it, that word. What is that?
Thank you for saying that, because I'm so.
Yeah, you and your photographer head. It's okay.
So it's like a small image on like a postcard, kind of. It's meant to be produced and like given away. Like it's pre-postcard, but right before the postcard became a thing.
It almost sounds like a Polaroid, though. So you know how Polaroid cameras, you pull the image and then they pull the thing off and then they give it to you? But it would be like an old time Polaroid, right? If they made it.
No, it's an actual print. It's a I believe hers is a daguerreotype. So it's a print. It takes a while to make, but they're like multiple, like you make it to produce multiple of them to like sell them, because people were like, this is when photography was really becoming accessible, and people were like, "Ooh, I can have a photograph." Like, "Ooh, like what is this thing? What is this object?" And so
would it be like the postcards that they sold of people getting
lynched?
The lynching postcards, would it be like that?
They were smaller though.
The ones, and it was pre that. It was a few decades before that, I would say.
Don't go, so Bria. Bria's got a question. Bria's got a question.
Yeah, Bria. Bria, come back.
She said I have to hop off.
Oh no.
Yeah, I have to go. I didn't it's okay. I can wait. I would love to I'm much like you. Like my mind moves really fast. I have a lot to say, but I don't want to rush. But I think the main thing that I wanted to point out is really appreciating your thoughts around actively being present in process. And I think what comes up for me, even saying that, is how important it is to actively be present in our healing when we're being so vulnerable in our work. A lot of things that show up in your work also shows up in mine. And I just really want more of these conversations with Black women. Like, it's definitely not like a one-time kind of thing. I think this is like really a space that I would love to see curated like often. Definitely like with themes around venerating like our spirits and like what comes up in that work. And something too that was really unique of just like seeing you in these self-portraits, which is something that I've been really exploring, but like fucking terrified of like really seeing myself. And this is the first time that I've admitted that. Like I'm talking like done got the film, like have all these like visions of like what I see for these self-portraits, but really, you know, afraid to of just like what comes up for me, you know. So I think I've just been thinking about that. So it was really affirming and healing even to see you actively like show up in those areas of your work, you know, with honoring your grandmother and, you know, honoring yourself as well. Just like how you like speak through process and veneration. It was just really beautiful. I really appreciate you for that. And yeah, also wanted to say I'm in Houston. I'm born and raised here. So if you're around and have time, would absolutely love to connect while you're here.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's exchange info on the Instagram. I know I'm following you already. So yes.
Yeah,
thank you
we're
so
following
much
each
for
other.
that. Okay. Yeah.
Thank
I'm here
you.
until Saturday. Let's link because I agree. We have to have this community. So thank you, Asia and Danielle, for facilitating this.
Hey, it's all Asia. Thank you, Asia.
Danielle,
so
too. Like your questions were, I don't know, you know, you can kind of, I think I really appreciate when they're like artist talks and you can tell the person that's like facilitating the conversation who's really invested into the artist's work. And that was also really nice to like hear. You can just tell that like you genuinely have a real like whatever spark that y'all had when y'all met each other, like that is really felt in this space. And so that was also like really beautiful to witness because, you know, that's important too. You know, that was something too that I miss most about taking like darkroom classes and like even like having critique night, you know, and just like being in conversation with, you know, your contemporaries, you know, about this work, because this shit is heavy. So being able to be seen by another Black woman is really, you know, necessary. And so it's been really beautiful just like seeing y'all do y'all thing in this whole conversation. So thank you
so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else? Because I know we got to wrap. I don't want Asia to kill me. So anybody else got some questions for Ricky? Let me say this, please visit her website. It is down here in the chat. Let me actually just go back and make sure I post it again. But I want you all to check out her work on her website. But even more than that, I think what's another thing that we've been all learning how to do is, you know, be active on social media. Ricky is there, she's present, and her work is there, and you'll be able to keep up with everything that she's doing. So please go ahead and follow her. Ricky, I love you, sister. I thank you so much that we have crossed paths. I cannot wait for us to continue to build together. All of you who have attended and stayed for our long talk, we love you. We are thankful for you. And I pray
Danielle,
that you all have
can you put your website too before you hang up? Put your website too, because I think, you know, that was a great point that she made about you two having that conversation and honoring the language. So please put your website on there.
Okay, all right. Let me draw my website down here too. Thank you, Mother in Love. She, you know, she gonna always plug me, y'all, for real. But I love each and every one of you. Bryce, we see you. Thank you so much. Like literally, like whenever I wear your shirt, people are like, yes, you know, hood close to gentrifiers. All right, everybody, we love you. Take care. Have a good night, y'all. Bye.
Love y'all. Thank you so much.
Freaking awesome.
Thank you.